And then, okay, here we go.
Sounds good.
Okay. Yeah. Hi, Susan, again.
Hi, Yvette.
How's your day going?
Oh, it's going well, thanks. I saw a Christmas concert. My 5-year-old's daycare did a Christmas concert this morning, so my day's just starting. How's your day going?
Wonderful. I got an early start, so it's been a few hours. Nothing as exciting as what you have.
It was
okay.
Cute. Yeah.
So we'll jump right in there. Susan, well, how would you introduce yourself rather than just saying that you're the CEO of Hire Talent, Inc.?
Sure, yeah. So I've worked in human resources my whole career for over 15 years, and I've been a business owner doing HR professional services for the past 5 years. And Hire Talent really focuses on building compelling cultures that inspire trust and productivity in the workplace.
Okay. Now, I read a little bit about how you started, and you started out in a less than ideal culture. How did that determine the way that you approach changing or helping develop organizational strategy?
Yeah, great question. My first professional role, I reported to a first-time people manager with a large financial institution in Toronto, Canada, and it was a really toxic workplace. The whole department was, and in particular, the relationship I had with the manager I reported into really opened my eyes as to effective and ineffective leadership styles. And it really made me want to go into the area of culture, workplace culture, to help organizations create awesome workplaces.
Okay, I like that. When you started your company, what was the main deficit that you saw in the industry? And how did you, well, you did talk about focusing on culture, but specifically in terms of building your brand, how did the deficit or the lacks in the industry shape the sort of brand you wanted to create?
Yeah, and I mean, as a business owner, it's very different. I work with a lot of small to medium-sized businesses, usually with 50 employees. 25 to 50 employees is my sweet spot. So that's very different than where I came from as an employee working with, global corporations. Very different requirements for human resources. So I guess the deficit was often the organizations I work with didn't even have a HR professional on staff. So that's kind of a good and a bad thing. There's a lot to be done in terms of work for them, because often they don't even have an HR policy manual or very rigorous recruitment practices or anything in many cases as far as HR. They're just kind of flying by the seat of their pants. But then I guess the downside of that is that sometimes you need to make the business case and make them understand HR is a lot more than just hiring on staff. That's just one piece of the pie.
Now, having somebody like you is a big part of managing risk for a company, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I've seen research that shows that human capital practices is number 3 on the list of top risk items for companies. Often they think, financial management, IT, cyber risk, but people risk is, people are very unpredictable, right? So they can introduce a lot of risk into your business if you don't have the right practices in place.
Absolutely. Because the first thing that comes to my mind would be lawsuit, that sort of litigation. And not having HR policies in place is one of the big things that opens small businesses, small and mid-sized businesses, I guess we're talking about, to exactly that sort of risk that could break them, correct?
Yeah, and it's funny, often when my phone rings with the new client, it's when they run into that exact situation, whether it's a termination
Mm.
and they realize, hey, we don't have employment agreements in place, and that's something we should have done now that we're in the situation where we need to get rid of an employee for whatever reason. Or if they have, say, a harassment allegation and they realize,
Mhm.
oh, we should have put together a HR policy manual with things like harassment and discrimination prevention so that employees know what is expected from our organizational lens, and that we've done our due diligence to train staff on what is acceptable conduct and not acceptable.
So okay, let's follow up on that scenario. So I ring you up and I tell you, Susan, we are in big trouble. We have an employee misconduct issue, and I thought we needed mediation. What do we do?
Well, I guess the first step would be, I would say, do you have an HR policy manual in place? If you plan to engage me, then send me that and let's assess what your current risk is, and tell me a bit about, the circumstances, what brought this issue to fruition, who's involved in it, have you done anything already? Sometimes I get a call and an organization has already done a workplace investigation that's gone awry, for lack of a better word, and they realize, we need some professional help here because things have gone from bad to worse. So I try to understand what's been done so far, what's your budget to fix this issue, and where are you located, because the legislation's different. I'm in Canada, so we
Mhm.
have provincial labor standards for each province. Is the states the same? You have it by state for labor? I think it is the same,
I
right? It's
think
by
we do.
state.
I mean, we have some federal issues that trump state
Right.
regulations,
As
but
do
there
we.
are state. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. But
Yeah.
yeah, it is
Yeah.
state specific.
Yeah, exactly. So I just try to understand what's the current state and what do we need to do to fix the issue within uh, what's realistic for your budget.
Okay. Now, let's say, following the same example, I only have 15 employees. I didn't know I needed this. I don't have any policies to send you. And so, what do you tell me?
And that would be, a very common response that I get. So it's funny you say that. I usually tell organizations that once you have at least 10 employees,
Mhm.
you need to have a basic HR policy manual to, protect yourself and protect everything you've built with your business. So if you don't have something in place, now is the time, no time like the present, to put
Right.
something together. And you just get those essential ones in place. Maybe you don't need a employee recognition policy. Maybe you don't need, a non-employee solicitation policy. But you need the fundamental ones that are, legislatively required. So you're meeting, stuff like occupational health and safety policy, harassment policy, code of conduct policy. You're meeting those essentials. You get
Okay.
the essentials down.
At what point do you recommend? You said at 10 employees. So, do you wait until you reach that point? Or if you start your business with 10 employees, you should have that in place before you even start officially hiring people?
That would be the ideal. I don't see that happening very often because I find, entrepreneurs, that there's so much to do, right, when you're starting a business. But it certainly does help mitigate your risk. And, it doesn't take as long as people think. You can outsource it to someone like myself. I've done dozens of them, so it only takes me probably the fraction of the time as it would someone that doesn't work in HR. But I mean, that's the ideal, right? To get your ducks in a row, the sooner the
Right.
better, to lower your risk. And lawsuits, employee lawsuits, I think they're more common in the States than Canada, from what I understand, but it's certainly becoming a more a more common situation in Canada as well. So you really do need to lower your risk across the board.
Do you have any idea why that might be? I mean, I know we're just speculating.
Yeah.
But do you think it's cultural?
That's a good question. I know our labor standards, we offer a greater benefit to employees. There's a higher rate of unionization in Canada than there is in the States. So I think that greater benefit sometimes bleeds over to the non-union staff as well. So one example, maternity leave. You can qualify for paid maternity leave through employment insurance in Canada. In the States, I think they're changing it in some states from what I've heard, providing a greater benefit. But I mean, a 1-year period in Canada, you can get paid maternity leave, and many employers top it up as well. So, I mean, I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but that's my opinion, that sometimes there's greater benefits offered. So maybe employees, there's not as many lawsuits filed for that reason.
Now, one of the things that I have observed is small businesses thinking that they can avoid some of these sort of complications, if you will, by using making everybody a contract worker. And oftentimes that is actually against the law in terms of how they're actually operating. They're not contract workers. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've seen that happen throughout my career as well. And, you know, there's been some class action lawsuits with some of the Canadian-based banks on that exact point, because they've retained full-time contractors for 3-4 years when in fact they should have been made permanent employees. And if I recall this right, I think the class action lawsuits, some of them were successful. So, I mean, if you're there long term, you're doing the same role. I mean, you have to be careful how you define it. If it's project based, that's different in my mind. But if it is, you know, an employee type relationship and you're using the employer's resources and they're year after year after year, I think the courts can see through that, and that still puts you at risk, is my opinion.
So there's a warning to people who are doing that.
Yeah, it probably won't eliminate all of them, but hopefully employers don't try to take a shortcut that way.
Right. Now, instead of actually hiring HR director, do companies retain you to meet that same need? Or is that part of how your services are set up?
Yes, that's one of my services, is outsourcing human resources. So for small to medium-sized businesses, sometimes they don't require a full-time HR employee. So we assess what they need, and they can hire talent is the name of my company. They can hire one of our consultants for whether it's 10 hours a month, 30 hours a month, or if it's a larger organization, they can outsource certain HR functions, whether that's payroll or recruitment or training. So we also work that way as well if you want to outsource a specific HR function.
Okay. What would you say has been the biggest change that you've noticed since you started your career until now, where you're a CEO, managing people, juggling all the balls?
The biggest change that I've seen, in what way? What do you mean?
In terms of your industry, and then maybe a bit of how that's affected your personal philosophy as an HR expert.
Well, I mean, I know the first thing that comes to mind is I know a lot more employers are providing flexible work arrangements and allowing employees to work from home, which I think is really smart. And there's also a lot more employers engaging freelancers like myself, because they realize it is more cost effective, that they, you know, don't have the additional risk of, you know, having to pay out a termination package or, you know, paying things like benefits or training costs or all those extra loaded costs that you have when you hire an employee. And actually, just the other day, I read that 46% of employees are going to be working from home in the next 10 years. 40%. So I think a big part of that is hiring on more freelancers and contractors as well.
Okay. And then how has that changed your professional philosophy?
How has that changed my professional philosophy? Well, I guess since I've been doing my own thing as an entrepreneur for 5 years now, it's really made me understand the value of outsourcing, even for my own business, because you can't be a subject matter expert in everything. The world's too complicated today. Right. So just like you're a branding expert, that I'm an HR expert. And when I see companies that think they can, wear many hats and just be the jack of all trades, it makes me think they're doomed, that, you need to concentrate on your core capabilities. Just like I outsource my finance and my IT to people who are experts in that area, the smart companies outsource their HR and their marketing in the areas that they don't specialize in.
That's smart. Now, this makes me think of when you mentioned my expertise in branding. I specialize in diversity and inclusion. And one of the things I'm exploring as a tagline right now is that diversity and inclusion isn't what you think it is.
It isn't, say that again, it isn't what you think it is?
What you think it is.
Oh, okay.
Because it's always about the perspective of somebody else, whether or not you're diverse or being inclusive. It's not what you think. And
I like that.
Oh, okay. Okay. Can you speak to that and what you see in terms of how businesses understand that and how that affects their brand risk?
Yeah, I know a year ago I completed my certification as a woman-owned business through We Connect International. So they certify businesses as 51% owned or more by females. And I did that to open up the doors to more procurement opportunities, because corporations want to increase the diversity, they want to increase their spend on diverse suppliers. So I think that makes a huge impact, because we're all consumers, right? And I want to consume from those companies that are supporting diversity. To me, that's reflective of a smart company, because diverse ideas create more innovation and have been shown to increase profitability for an organization, just like diverse boards are more successful and make better decisions. So I'm a big advocate for diversity, and I support organizations that support it through their procurement spend.
And so that is something that you also help businesses with in their recruitment of new hires, correct?
I put together what I call a talent management plan. So I can help plan what competencies you need to fill and look at things like the diversity of your existing workforce in terms of who you have on staff. So that's something often bigger organizations look for, to understand where they may have gaps in their diversity demographics.
Do you think that that's becoming more of a concern with small businesses, or it's sort of off of their radar until something happens?
I don't see it as much in my local marketplace in St. John's, Newfoundland, but I think in the bigger cities like Toronto and Vancouver, that's certainly more on the radar. And, the smaller to medium-sized businesses, if they just have 50 employees, they often don't have the budget to support that. But it may be a missed opportunity on their part. That's the line of thinking I come across. But certainly the larger organizations seem to be quite active in that area.
Okay, now since we're getting close to wrapping up, I'd like to end on a positive note. Something a little of some kind of feel good. What is your favorite aspect of what you do? What do you love the most? What keeps you in it?
I love going into workplaces and transforming the culture. So going into what is a toxic workplace and transforming it so 6 months down the road, if I drop in to say hello, it's a completely different dynamic, that employees are smiling and laughing and communicating, and that's reflective of putting together strong HR practices and rolling out training to the leadership team so they know how to lead and engage their staff. So that's why I'm in human resources. That's why I get out of bed in the morning, to create great workplaces. Because, I mean, you think about people are at work 8 hours a day, that if you're going into a toxic environment, it's going to impact your life outside of work. So to me, it's very meaningful, right? Like, it impacts how you treat your kids at the end of the day if you're abused in the workplace or harassed in the workplace at the worst extreme of it. So that's certainly what motivates me to work in human resources.
Oh, I love that. Because it really determines whether you have a good day or not.
Mm-hmm. And when it's day in and day out, like the very toxic workplaces, I mean, I know my first role when I was working in a toxic workplace, I lost 25 pounds. I couldn't eat at lunch because I felt sick when I was there. And while I would like to lose some weight now, at the time, it was not that way. No, at the time, it was just, in retrospect, a really awful experience. So I understand both extremes. I've seen amazing workplaces where it's the opposite of that, and I've worked in those too. So I just know the impact it can have. I have felt it firsthand.
I totally agree. And one of the things as we close this is that that is an essential part of brand value, because if your employees are not happy and they're dissatisfied, or worse, disgruntled, they're your point of contact with your customers.
Absolutely.
And trickle down.
Absolutely. It's going to hurt your bottom line. Like, the productivity of your staff, just because they're there doesn't mean they're producing anything. And if they're not engaged, happy, treated right, you're absolutely right. They're going to treat your customers. It's going to be a reflection of how they're treated. So it's where you start. Yeah.
Right. Because I know one of the case studies I used in one of my profiles is a company that's no longer around, but there was some internal sabotage because these issues went unchecked for so long, and the HR person was actually being bullied, and so it was completely ineffective. So
that's awful.
That's
yeah. That's right. So, I mean, it's better to nip those situations in the bud rather than let them fester. And if any organization needs help in that area, I work with companies across North America, and my website is www.hiretalent.ca. And yeah, happy to have a chat with anyone if they have a question of where to start to address some of these issues.
Oops, okay. Well, I will let you go. Someone's calling you right now.
Oh, yes. Sorry about that.
No problem at all. We'll make sure that your Twitter handle and people can find you. And thank you so much, Susan. I'll talk to you next time.
Okay, thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.